actually in charge.
Hi. Hello, everyone, and you are all so courageous to come in such a wet day. I'm very, very honored and so happy to introduce Professor Cal Deco. I have known her writing and her research before I met her. I read so many of her articles. Some of them I taught, some of them my students read. And then I met her, and it was a great, great pleasure to get to know the one behind those articles. Professor Deco is a very good researcher and has done a lot of research on women and art in Israel. It's a very, very painful topic. The mainstream has silenced women artists in Israel, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's here as well. They have been ignored, mocked, and even ridiculed by only saying they are not as good as men. Professor Deco brought all those artists, some of them she's going to talk about today, but others is her in her writing. She brought them to the front line. Among her many articles, I will mention her two books. One is Gendered Art and Feminist Theory, which was published by Cambridge Scholars Publishing in 2013. And the other one, which is in Hebrew, but I know that it's in translation and in a publishing process, which is called, it was published in 2013 as well, but and it is called Women and Migration, Art and Gender in a Transnational Age. Her writing includes work on Ethiopian women artists, but today we will hear about Russian immigration. I'm going to read it. Thinking about Israeli society through visual culture, the case of contemporary art by former Soviet Union immigrants. So please let us all welcome Professor Deco.
Thank you so much for this generous introduction. So good afternoon. I'll just put this aside, and thank you all for coming. And I would like to start by thanking Professor Pnina Perry and Professor Yoram Perry, the head of the Israel Studies and the director of the Institute of the Gildenhorn Institute for Israel Studies. And also thank you to Samantha, who's taking the video and the pictures. So thank you, Samantha, the coordinator. And I would like to deeply thank the Department of Art History and Archaeology and to Professor Meredith Gill, the director of the department, and also to Professor Joshua Shannon. And also, and finally, I would just like to thank very, very much the director of this wonderful space that we're in, the Michelle Smith Collaboratory for Visual Culture, Professor Quint Gregory. So thank you. My talk today is part of a larger project, as Professor Pnina Perry just said, an ongoing research that I'm engaged in for the last 9 years now. And I study various social groups of immigrants who arrived in the state of Israel after 1989. This year, 1989, is a landmark year that entails major global changes and marks the era of transnationalism. So this is the time frame in which I work. And I integrate methodologies and theories from different disciplines. I write about Israeli Ethiopians, like you mentioned, Pnina, and Israeli French artists, Israeli Mizrahi artists, and so on and so on. But today, this is our topic. I'll just put it aside because I just know I'm going to just know it. So it's a comparative study, what I do. So today we will talk about this chapter that discusses gendered aspect of Israeli Russian women artists. I say this and I will explain. So the contemporary era of mass migration under transnational existence poses new challenges for understanding questions of citizenship, cultural belonging, and identity. The effort to conceptualize and articulate identity always a complex project, becomes all the more complex when examined in the unique context of the State of Israel, as I will argue today. Focusing on women artists who emigrated from the former Soviet Union, we will see that even more than 2 decades after their arrival, these women are still actively engaged in the process of formulating their experiences as immigrants. By analyzing their artworks, we can learn about their experiences and about identity construction processes under conditions of migration. Yet discussing migration calls for a wider perspective than only thinking about the subjective experiences of the immigrants themselves. In order to consider it critically, we must also attend to the receiving society, itself transformed by the massive wave of that immigration. The influx of approximately 1 million immigrants from the former Soviet Union between 1989 and 2010 altered the very nature of Israeli populace, which totaled at the time when the wave has started 7.5 million approximately, so 1 million makes a substantial mass of the overall. Okay? So despite the massive demographic presence of the people from the former Soviet Union, or perhaps because of it, the immigrants, and particularly so the women among them, have been subjected to a wide array of stereotypes. As many of them arrived in Israel on the heels of the collapse of the Soviet regime, they are often perceived in Israel as straightforward economic migrants whose ties to Judaism and Zionism are instrumental rather than sincere. And this is an important point. We should remember this point. I will elaborate on this in the upcoming minutes. Okay. So highly critical of this stance, the artists I consider here today engage with the claim, addressing themes related to their assimilation into the Israeli society, claiming for a more complex and nuanced reading of the whole subject. So I'll just flip to the very first. This is the one. It's all in Hebrew, but I will translate, I promise. Artist Tamara Bodinsky, who was born in 1981 in St. Petersburg and arrived in Israel at the age of 7, created an artist book which consists of digitally manipulated images and various texts. In this photo, we see here the artist stands as she gazes directly at the camera, captions accompanying various parts of her body. The captions indicate common stereotypes that she has encountered during her life as a former Soviet Union migrant in Israel. So, does not drink vodka, points the caption to her mouth. Not Christian, pointing to her chest. The caption reads, where I would say like a cross on the chain would or might have been, but she is Jewish. Not a prostitute or a slut, pointing to her genitalia. No abusive father or husband, pointing to an unbruised, clean, beautiful thigh, etc., etc. I will not translate all the captions today. So this photo and some 42 actually, other photographs in the series reflect the multitude of stereotypes attributed to her by veteran Israelis. Okay, she encountered those and then she negotiates them. As I mentioned, Brodinski uses her own body to construct these representations. In another image, for example, this one deals with a derogative attitude she received as veterans Israeli always say that she is probably an alcoholic, homeless woman. Yes, she's holding an empty bottle of vodka. Another image. Quinn, can you help me please with this? For some reason it's... Yes, thank you. Maybe I'll give you this. Thank you so much. Okay. So another image deals with the derogative attitude she received as veteran Israelis do not usually believe her or other immigrants from Russia that she's sincere about contributing to the country, but rather they all dwell in socioeconomic problems of drinking, for that matter. And the caption reads, "Your daughter was accepted into the Air Force?" I don't think so. In yet another image, thank you, her neck is arched backwards in a way that suggests sexual climax, addressing the stereotype of Russian women as hypersexual beings and or working in the sex industry. And the ironic caption reads, "How do Russian women do it?" or "How does she do it?" So we can clearly see that her work touches upon reception theory, a very useful methodology for art historians. So we're talking about the politics of representation, the gaze, who holds the power to look and who is looked upon, who has the power to represent themselves and who is turned into a muted, distorted object of the gaze. And what can we learn from all that about the power relations in the reality of the day-to-day life and society? Many veteran Israelis regard former Soviet Union immigrants, and immigrants in general, as a monolithic group, assuming their collective nature and behavior, making generalizing remarks about individuals, and actually articulating racist remarks about them. This kind of behavior, known as neo-racism, makes no explicit mention of racial traits, but instead relates to cultural differences, such as drinking and eating habits, literary preferences, or hobbies as natural attributes. Coined by Etienne Balibar, the French philosopher and a political theoretician, racism without races denotes an elusive phenomenon used to affirm racist ideologies. So now I would quickly move to another artist, and I want to discuss a different aspect of this issue. Artist Teresa Skripczak was born in 1989 in Moldova and moved to Israel at the age of 7. Growing up in Israel, Skripczak has never placed particular importance to the fact that she was Jewish only on her father's side, which is the wrong side from the halakha point of view. Halakha in Hebrew means the Orthodox rabbinate law, which I'll explain their relevance in just a few seconds. But although I will say right now already at this point that you need to know that Jewish identity is matrilineal. So it has to be on the mother's side in order for a person to be considered a pure Jew, a Jewish person, according to the rabbis, not according to cultural belonging. So only after high school did Skripczak truly understand, thank you, this is the moment, the implications of this fact, her being on the father's side only Jewish. So this work is part of a series of works created soon after her discovery, when she realized this, in which she processed her attitudes toward religion affiliation. But the representation is quite extraordinary. We don't have the entire body. It's partial, fragmented, almost violent. To show beheaded figures this way, it's not a complete entity and not a whole person, a subject. So in an interview with me, Skripczak told me about all this, describing this startling experience, and I would like to quote her words to you and say, "When I first realized this, that I was not Jewish, I invested much effort in hiding the fact because it became my little secret. But eventually, after feeling a lots and lots of social pressure, I underwent a formal conversion to Judaism." So now she is Jewish. Okay? At this point, I just need to explain to those not familiar with the subject that Jewish identity in the State of Israel extends beyond religion to incorporate questions of nationality. Israel has a unique model of nationality which distinguishes between Jews and non-Jews. Okay? Because religion matters and state matters are not fully separated in the country, Jews who are not recognized as such by the rabbis' authorities, as I said, have reduced civil rights. in the domain of marital status, for example. And of course, we're not talking about Arab citizens, Muslim or Christian, which is a totally different subject than what we can talk about today. So these developments, her realizing that she was not a pure Jew, inspired Skripczak to create another series of artworks. Could you please get the other one? Such as the video project in which she interviewed young women in similar predicaments to her own, discussing especially the ceremonial act of immersion in water, the tevila, which is part of the conversion into Judaism. So I'll just explain again very, very briefly, I'm sorry, that this ritual of immersion in water is the final stage of a long conversion process. The converted is supposed to emerge from the water a new person, okay? So for females, it's first performed fully nude in the presence of a female ritual bathhouse attendant, and then a second immersion then takes place before three men, rabbis, who overlook the ceremony from an upper level of the bathhouse, with the woman wearing only a very loose robe over her naked body, and then that seals the conversion. Okay, so back to the art. In most segments of the video project, the artist recorded young women who preferred to remain anonymous and have their face blurred, like we have on the left. But one has agreed to have her face non-pixeled and have her first name only. Her name is Sophie. And if we were to hear, I'm very, very sorry, we don't have time to run the whole video. It's a very long video. I just brought those two still photos from it. If we were to run it, we would hear her words. So I want to just have to quote a paragraph of what Sophie said if we were to hear it, okay? This is her experience of the ceremony of the immersion in water, okay? While I was in the water, totally naked, under this wide gown, the men came and the gown kept floating up onto the surface, and I was afraid that the rabbis would see me, would see my naked body. In this awkward situation, they started asking me questions such as, over what do Jews say their blessings, etc., etc. And then she goes on, and these were really actually simple questions, but because of the awkward situation, I panicked and I couldn't answer even a single question. I now recall that I had this feeling of dissociation. I wasn't thinking, I wasn't feeling, as if I wasn't even there by myself, my body. So, after working on this video project for over 2 years, the artist, Thaisa Skripczak, she told me in my interview, we had several meetings during those days. I would like to quote her words, the artist, not Sophie's words. Today, having done this artistic project about the experience of so many women who underwent the traumatic procedure, I am not at all sure I would have agreed to undergo it. Actually, I'm done apologizing for being me. In other countries, it has no importance if you're Muslim, Christian, or any other religion. It has no effect on your nationality or citizenship. In Israel, it's a never-ending process of explaining and apologizing for your religious identity. At school, at military service, I always had to hide some part of my identity. So, touching again upon reception theory, gender, politics of seeing, and ways to fight and reclaim the gaze, one of the most challenging gender issues for former Soviet Union women in Israel relates to the stereotype of the Russian prostitute. An example for the artist's preoccupation with this deep-rooted stereotype is found in a video series created by Rufina Muravyova, originally from the Ukraine. Please, if we can. So this is also a video which we will not have time to see, so I just chose 3 stills from it. So the video presents a sequence of random encounters in different cities across the country, documented by the artist with a hidden camera. Okay, so she filmed men, strangers, who approached her with direct solicitations of sex for money. Again, I apologize, but I will just say what we see here. I wanted to have sex with you. I will give you money. If you weren't sexy, I wouldn't have stopped you. Okay, so this is what those say. In an interview with me, the artist explained that the dynamics depicted in the video derived directly from her being a former Soviet Union woman, and I quote her words to you. Because I look Russian, most of my personal artistic research is about the relationships between veteran Israeli men and former Soviet women. And personally, I've always been the object of male attention because it fits the Russian type. I'm blonde and good-looking. So what I wanted to do now is just show you the portrait of Rufina Muravyova, which I never do, actually. It usually has no relation how the artist looks or what are their features. But actually, not only did I get her consent to show you this portrait of her today, it was actually her idea when we talked about it. When I asked her consent, she says, please show them the picture because that's the raison d'etre of all my work for 4 long years. This is what I do in my art. So let's go back to it. Well, let's go forward to just the next one. She looks very, very Russian, okay? She's smart, she's tall, she's beautiful, she's so intelligent, but yet she does look very Russian. Okay, so the construction and perpetuation of stereotypes about former Soviet Union women migrants as prostitutes is strikingly evident in Israeli media in general and in the printed press in particular, as media scholar Daphna Lemish demonstrates. Her studies show that the majority of media references to former Soviet Union women throughout the 1990s related to prostitution. Otherwise, it didn't get mentioned in the media. Okay, so it was like a prostitute was arrested. She is from the former. Okay, so these are the association. So the actual bodies of former Soviet Union females in Israel thus turn into an active site of the marking of national boundaries, explains anthropologist Deborah Golden. According to Golden, the potential coupling of Jewish men with hundreds of thousands of Russian women whose Jewishness is doubted, according to the halakha and the rabbis, has become the source of national existential fear. These women, the scholar Golden observes, are perceived as threatening to the Jewish collective's purity and Israel's ethno-national identity because of their potential offsprings, right? You remember Jewish identity being matrilineal. It became a question of demographics, okay? The rhetoric in Israel is that we are a small country surrounded by enemies, and there are also the Palestinian conflict, so Jews must control the demographic or lose the sovereignty over the country. It's geopolitics, okay? Please join us, yes. So in parentheses, I will say this, that the stereotype of the Russian woman as prostitutes has, very unfortunately, roots in concrete reality too. The terrible phenomena of sex trafficking of ex-Soviet women to the West, we know, was especially felt in the 1990s. So it has some roots in reality. But these women we discuss here today have no connection to this very unfortunate and terrible phenomenon, and yet they keep associated with it just because of their outer look. Okay. Contra the veteran Israeli gaze, which automatically places all ex-Soviet immigrants in a single ethno-cultural category, this group is in fact far from homogeneous. Even when the Soviet Union was one country, great differences existed between the residents of its Asian and European regions. Differences of geography, climate, local culture, and religion. and the art produced by immigrants from the Asian republics typically reflects a culture that is a mixture of pan-Soviet and local elements. Artist Rimar Snanov, born in Uzbekistan, if we can see the next slide, please, is a multimedia artist influenced by diverse sources and styles. One of her sculptures, Mashrabia is called, it's Arabic, is a large piece that imitates the architectonic element of a lattice. The work relates to the artist's Uzbeki-Russian roots in a kind of a contemporary Israeli blend of Western and Arab Middle Eastern elements all together. So the piece engages not only in cultural but also gendered and sexual aspects. The Mashrabia is a fascinating object because of its liminality, of its positioning, right? It's both an integral part of an external wall and an interruption in that wall flow, in the wall's flow, because it's a window which opens space in the object, right? Moreover, it is not only or simply just a functional solution that allows cool air to flow into the house in hot climates, but it is also part of a culture, primarily Islamic, in which women remain within the domestic space from where they can look outside without themselves being seen. Also, if we can see the next slide, the artist herself stated in the interview with me, I want to quote her words and say, "From afar, the Mashrabia gives the impression of being made of concrete, but when you get closer, you see that it's covered all with gray, soft fur. You know," she laughs, "fur is known to have alluring connotation, very sexual." So now if we can see the next slide, please, I will say about this work that artist Olesya Saitov, which is also born in Uzbekistan, arrived in Israel at the age of 12. An emblematic example of an immigrant who rejects any one single or one-dimensional identity, she embraces her hybridity. And we can see the video now, so we do get to see one video today.
Who are you?
Well, who am I? One day, I popped up to my mom and asked, "Let us baptize me. It's so awesome." All of my friends are. So I did like to be as well. And it's a hot deal today. Everyone watches too.
Ты не можешь окреститься. Не просто не можешь, а тебе нельзя.
Well, well, well. What have I done wrong? Why it is forbidden for me?
Ты еврейка, а у евреев свое вероисповедание – иудаизм.
Tell me, Mom, who are they, these Jews?
Евреи – это такие же люди, как и все, только у них есть свои традиции, своя кухня. Но мы живем в Советском Союзе, и здесь все равны, а Бога вообще нет, а есть только панки.
What do I know about Jews? Well, they are smart. They are very talented. I start to like it. They play music. For example, they are fine violinists. In addition, they write in a funny way from right to left. It has to be a hard task. I'm Jewish. Okay, if so, there is no need to get baptized, right? But am I supposed to get circumcised if I'm Jewish? Oops. I'd better ask my dad. He probably knows better. Dad, is it so hard to be Jewish?
Еврейкой? Ты узбечка. Потому что я узбек. И вера у нас ислам. И вообще, марш на кухню помогать маме.
That was shocking news. I'm a Jew and an Uzbek all in one. who said that it was impossible to unite Judaism and Islam. I have no problem with myself. Perhaps the proportion is the issue? Well, can anybody say where crosses the border between Judaism and Islam deep inside me? To clarify this dilemma, my father took me one day to his homeland, Uzbekistan. He told me about my grandfather who was a mullah before the communists came. And my grandmother, Tajigul, was an ordinary Uzbek woman. Grandma, what does your name mean?
Sen kanda katta bo'lib qolsan, senga turmushga chiqish kerak. Bizim ko'chada bir yaxshi bola bor.
That's it. Yeah, very interesting. I have to decide who I am, a Jew or an Uzbek. But when I was close to the decision, my parents came to the conclusion that we had to leave. So we quickly packed and came to Israel. Here it gets clear there is no such a problem. If my mom is Jewish, I am Jewish as well. I got used to the new life in a short time. I like the local cuisine very much. And the local men just don't let me pass by. I just can't get why everyone thinks I'm Russian. Hard to believe. I only came to Israel and turned to be a Russian. So, what am I? Jewish, Uzbek, Russian, or maybe someone else? Is it an obligation to decide? Who cares? Anyway, now, thanks to high technologies like international TV and internet, people don't really differ one from another by one's religion or nation, but by interest and professional skills. Never mind. In other words, I'm Alisa. Nice to meet you.
Giving the honors to the creators to run it. I think we can stop. Gwen, thank you. So back to the slide that just has her. No, before before that maybe.
Yep.
Yeah, this is good. I think. So an emblematic example of an immigrant who rejects this single one-dimensional. As I said, she embraces hybridity. Contemporary cultural studies and discourse explores such intermediate states and argues against binary perception of cultural possibilities. Only Israeli, only Jewish, only Muslim. The hybrid existence opens up new possibility, advocating the creation of new identity categories. But this very ambiguity of hybrid subjects, their failure, so to speak, to fit into any one single existing category, causes them to be perceived as a threat by the hegemonic society. It's always true in Israel, even more so. The hybrid subject is regarded as a paradox because, as Homi Bhabha notes, hybridity is a problematic presentation that is perceived as a disturbance in the social order. How could she be, of course, Jewish and Muslim in the same one person, especially in our geopolitical contexts? Conclusion. The artistic products of women discussed here show that they do not share a monolithic sense of Israeli identity. Nevertheless, all the artworks demonstrate the insufficiency of a binary model of identity and suggests instead the existence of a flexible continuum of identity. Such works demonstrate the necessity of rejecting Israeliness and especially Jewishness as an essentialist concept and promotes a new understanding of it as a much more fluid entity constructed of many different facets, among them gender, ethnicity, class, religion, and so on, and of which are all influenced by circumstance and constantly in flux. In keeping this thread, I argue that instead of thinking through meta-narratives and trying to conceptualize a maximally comprehensive system of categorization, the true complexity of the field, as reflected in the cases explored earlier and many others that we didn't have a chance to see here today, calls for applying a perspective of intersectionality. This approach stands to yield a nuanced map of many different identities, stressing the particularity of every subject's life and experiences. Moreover, I propose that it is politically important to study the former Soviet women artists, or Ethiopian artists, or South American artists, for that matter, who are situated, by and large, on the margins of the Israeli mainstream art scene, and understand the ways in which this group can hold valuable cultural knowledge. These works can serve as a subversive element that undermines the existing rigid, oppressive social orders. Studies such as my own can establish their cultural impact, which is evident in two levels. One, the first one, within the field of art itself, and the second level, within the general public political sphere. Destabilizing the Israeli art canon may be advanced by using the raison model proposed by Deleuze and Guattari, which promotes a non-linear, non-binary, web-like interpretation of content. Above all, the raison model yields a map of many options rather than a single axis of a distinct route that has one clear point of origin. Thus, in trying to understand contemporary Israeli identities in the age of globalization, Deleuze and Guattari's model could replace the cultural urge for a single, all-encompassing explanation which actually erases differences between people in an oppressive manner that perpetuates the existing power relations between social groups and individuals. As for the second level, that of the effect on the general public political sphere, the art of immigrant women artists from the former Soviet Union effectively reflects shifting social processes and underscores the unique contribution of art to the social discussion of such sensitive and controversial issues as the question of, if we can have the next one, yes, this. You remember the issue of who is a Jew that Taisa Skripchak raised, and this is about the conversion into Judaism, right? And that raises the charged issue of the oppressive gendered aspects of the process of women's conversion in a way that is still absent from the public discourse in the country. I'm sorry we don't have too much time to explain why it is a taboo issue in the political sphere, but it's an untouched subject, okay? So art can do that. So I concur with the conclusion of sociologists Tamar Rappaport and Edna Lumsky, who stress the centrality of gendered aspect in relation to immigration to Israel, and argue that it is a prominent factor influencing the way in which all former Soviet Union immigrants form their identity, men and women, and the ways in which they understand themselves in the new country of residence in which they have arrived. There are, I should explain again, profound gender differences between the sexes, whereas men tend to act within the patriarchal framework of national demands and expectations, including such practices as male circumcision and militarist conduct and serving in the army. The national demands placed upon women are from a more ambiguous nature in that sense. So women find themselves with creative, independent ways of self-defining their expressions, their lives as newcomers, as Israelis, even if it is Russian Israelis in the country. If we can see the next one, please. Some artists engage in outward appearance. For example, Anya Krupyakov or Anna Lukashensky, or Ina Polonsky. Others express, if we can see the next one, concerns about their sense of security as women in an area of constant conflict and war zones, or like Foma does. That's not her real name. She's basically an street art and many artists, if we can see the next one, are very concerned about occupational issues as migrant women in a new country, like Anya Kolpnikov does in this series. She has yet another one, if we can see the next one too. And and yet another one would be just talking about the challenges of arriving in the new country as women in advanced age. So, etc., etc. We have so many more examples. Just because the time is short, I didn't bring others. But all these diverse artworks discussed here and in my book draw attention to the situation of unease in both within the individual and the subject, and within the society as whole, revealing a powerful tension between the yearning of belonging and the desire for preserving parts of the original culture. Thank you. Maybe we can have the lights and we can, open the floor for questions. I'll be very happy to try and answer them. Yes?
So some of the women artists you gave the years that they had arrived, and they seem to be younger. So I didn't know if Anna Kopiakova,
Yes.
who deals with older women, is a little older, but I was wondering if you find older artists are addressing the same problems as the younger ones.
Yes. So thank you very much for this question. Actually, I have been working in a very specific group that are called, in sociological terms, 1.5 generation. That means that they are not first generation arriving in Israel fully grown and from the older country, and they have their challenges, are they second generation born in the new country and having only cultural challenges more than really national identity. So 1.5 generation are bracket of age that they have arrived between the age of 4 or 5 and 18. That is a sociological term. That means that they still remember the old country. And they were sometimes raised in the old educational system. They had to learn the national anthem. They were taught to pledge allegiance to the flag, and all that. And then they said, "No, you're not Russian. Start over." So that age is a very specifically fragile age bracket, and also it happens with yet another challenge and problematic, difficult age, which is puberty. So they have a national community identity crisis in a sense, and also they have to deal with the gendered a crisis of becoming a woman or a man. So manhood and womanhood is something they have to really tackle at the same time. So, and the intragenerational it's very different for the older generation and the younger generation, and the 1.5 is just in the middle, like sandwiches. So this is the age I have been working on. So I'm sorry I forgot to say the years that they were born and arrived, but they all arrived between the age of 5 and 16. So it's very, very crucial to say that. So thank you very much for your question, because it is crucial to understand this. Yes?
In the past, the painters who came to Israel had their artistic center, or if we could use spiritual center, either in Germany or in Paris. Where would you think, if at all, maybe it's a fluid center, where would be their center, the artists that you show, their center?
So I think you kind of answered the question, but it is important to understand that all these artists that we have seen today were artistically educated in the state of Israel as grown up because they arrived as children. So they have a mixture. They do have a memory, more of a cultural memory of the Soviet Union art and that sense, but they are educated in Israel, so it's very much a Western upbringing in art education. In that sense, they are Israel is, some say that, well, I have to explain this. Some Israelis think that we are an imaginary peninsula of an extension of Europe, in the sense, and not Middle East. So that's, But the art canon is very much a Western canon when they studied their art education. So in that sense, they will learn Picasso and they will learn American contemporary art, European contemporary art, Pipilotiriste. This is what one of the influences an artist told me, if you know her. It's a mixture, I think, but it's really what they say. We cannot and we will not say who we are. We will not align to this urge to pinpoint us as one and as this. Am I 70% Russian? Am I 20% Russian? No, and I keep the right to keep changing it. One day I want to be more this. I can be the other on the other day. Don't tell me, but you said that the other day. I mean, so it's really, it touches upon postmodern concepts of the subject and being multifaceted. And so thank you very, very much for this important remark, because I really I concur with your. There is no center in that sense. Thank you.
So even after converting to Judaism, for females anyway, are they looked at differently as now you're Jewish and you're not Muslim or Christian anymore? Are they looked at differently from the veteran Jewish people? And is it more pressure? Is it pressure on guys as well to convert, or are they like, it's whatever, it doesn't matter because your Jewish descent is from your mother, not necessarily your father?
So it's a very ethno-national country that has, it was established in 1948 as officially as the state of the Jewish people in the modern era after Second World War and everything that. Of course, 20% or more, or some 21% of the citizens are Arab, and there are some like 3% of am I right with the statistics, right? And they are, you don't really, when you see a person, you don't know their religion, right? But because, you remember Rufina Morvayova, this very blonde, beautiful lady artist that did the hidden camera, she will always get it. And she was pure Jew on both sides anyway. So you're, a priori, you're suspected. If you are Russian looking, you're always going to get it. It is also right for the men, but even more so because of the existential fear that I described earlier about the women determining the offspring's religion. And it's, like I said, it's questions of demographics. So more pressure is on the women. And then that's why they're whores, non-Jews, and they're like, they don't belong to our boundaries of the collective. A priori, it has nothing to do if they're Jewish or not Jewish, half Jewish, mother's side, father's side. It's just don't belong. You can't be here. So it touches upon xenophobia, which we experience. This is a very difficult time for everybody now. The news is terrible, so I can imagine that it touches upon issues that are, everywhere around the globe nowadays. But Israel is a very specific case study because of its special model of nationality.
I was wondering, how well received is these women's art in Israel and in the world?
Not very well received. It has to do with multiple levels of and issues. One is, of course, art canon. You have to be very, very well connected. Even your mother or father, so they're newcomers. Even though some of them are already here for 20 years, almost 20 here. There, sorry, Israel. So identified with the state of Israel. So I am Israeli. So, but it's always a push and pull. That touches upon identity politics. So identity politics is a complex issue also in Israel, as the Zionist agenda is a very, very strong, and we're a young country, so it's a still ongoing negotiation of Zionism, post-Zionism. Why are they here? Are they here because they're genuinely interested to be part of the collective? Or they're just going to, go to Germany in the next year. So they're not really, they don't belong. They're just temporary here. So it has to do with art and non-art issues. So it's the field, but it's also politics. So they are, by and large, as I said before in my talk, they are marginalized. We have like the token artist, which is ex-Soviet, and she's so successful, and she's earning lots of money. She's selling beautiful art, and Zoya Cherkesky, if somebody of the Israeli scholars know her, she's wonderful, but there are like 2 of those. The others are still, you're talking about Russia, not interesting, so it's a push and pull situation. Hopefully now it's going to be different, but identity politics is, it hit in the United States for the late 60s, 70s, and an ongoing issue. Israel, it started more in the 1990s for those specific reasons of new country, having low priority of particular identities versus, a nation that has, like every other day we have a war. So I think it has to do with that. So it's like a quantum leap that it's now closing a gap, hopefully. Like Professor Pnina Perry mentioned at the beginning, it will now, for studies like mine, other studies, the gap is getting, to be closed because we force them to talk, and they're in the forefront. I'm having talks all over the country about this in Israel, so they have to talk about it, even so they get to know these artists now. But I think they would be obscure if, power relations. Yes.
Found that image you clicked on really quickly of the street art really fascinating.
Hold on, can we go
The
back?
sketch.
Yes. It's a fanzine, actually. So, fanzine, yeah.
And I think on 2 things, at the time that I grew up, the first real big memory I have of conflict in Europe was the fall of the Berlin Wall, and then the fall of the Soviet Union. And then since, it's just been this steady diet of media, images of war and so on and so on and so on. So there's that aspect. Then there's this. I really got into graphic novels for a period of time. And this struck on a few graphic novels that I'm really interested in, particular artists, so on and so forth. So without really getting into a lot of detail, I just kind of wonder how much of a voice do the street artists have with regards to either anything or this medium in particular?
So in Israel, it's just starting to pick up in the last decade, even less, 8 to 9 years, to be really something to notice about. And thanks for internet and everything, we're global now, so we know Banksy. So Banksy echoes back on artists like Foma, but nobody knows Foma. I had to really research and dig in. Some people know her because she finished her art academy and, her graduate friends and her teacher or so, but it's a challenge just to find them. This is why I've been doing it for 9 years. And I just wrote the book for the last 2 years of that, because I've just been working the field to find those people, to work with those people. So I have this fanzine back home, and I went to the studio, and she does basically art work, but so. But she's very much of a feminist, and she does anti-war, pacifist, and harassment, sexual harassment issues, and being a woman in this very ethno-national militarist environment of the state of Israel as she conceives it. I'm sure that everything I said here is not always a consensus by all Israelis. They present a very specific stance. I'm sure there are other stances, so please don't get the idea that this is Israel. So it's just a fragment of it, especially from the eyes of women. So we have to remember that there are many other narratives that can explain how Israel is. So just wanted to say that. You wanted to ask me before?
Yes, it's not a very well-formed question yet, but predominantly what you showed us today was like photo and video works, and I was wondering if that is what like you find most in your work, searching for people, and why you think that like video and photographs have kind of like taken center
Thank you
stage.
so much. No, actually, lots of the, I don't know if oh, it's working. Just to show a couple of other things I did. This is actually for Israeli Ethiopian artists. It is a different chapter of my book, but she's a performance artist, as you see here. And they're very, very different, and some of them are just painters, and we have the whole range. So we have the exact same range like it happens in Europe, in the States, in Middle Eastern countries. So it's everything in that sense, and it's very diverse and very, very exciting work that is being done. Yes. Sorry.
I sort of wanted to expand actually on his question, because you talked about how art was a way to sort of enter the social discussion and introduce a hybridity that subverts sort of these rigid, I guess, structures that were in place. But how, I guess, to what extent are these artists present in the public's consciousness?
As I mentioned before, not so much until my book was published in 2013, and still not very much so, because it's an art book, and just people from the specific discipline in art history, they will pick up this book. So, wait, I have this book. It's actually going to Michal today, so maybe you can. Eventually it's going to be, so maybe you can circulate. Sorry, it's in Hebrew. But it's going to be in, oh, what did I do? So this is a French-Israeli artist and going back to France, and has nothing to do with our talk today. I just wanted to show performance art, right? So, and I pushed it, so I'll just say something about that. And what she did is she made Aliyah, that's, immigrating into the country, and after she finished the best art school in Israel, Bezalel Academy of Art, she decided that she's going to do her graduation project in France, in where she lived, in Paris. So she's reconquering the space in Paris, which she's no longer supposedly entitled to occupy because she gave it up. But no, here she claims that she's not giving up anything. She has the right to be multi-transnational in that sense. Transnationalism is something I didn't mention. I don't know if we need to clear what that means. Just being transnational is this thinking about individuals or groups, maintaining connections and interactions across countries and even continents, that in the way that social lives are constructed and maintained, not only in a single one nation state, but across transnational spaces. So that could be actual spaces, or that could be virtual spaces. Being transnational, you could just go online and meddle with the politics in the other country you're in, and actually even influence it. So you're transnational. You can have commerce and import-export and influence both countries that you're in. So you're transnational, and that can happen only now in the end in this age. So, yes?
Just to follow up on the two questions about how well received the art is, and you basically insinuated that it's not really that well known, well received. But I was wondering if that, since we were talking about women, immigrant women, specifically Russian women, if that indifference towards the art or not well received, is it along gender lines, like, or the so-called pure Israeli women just as much look down upon these immigrant women and their art as much as the men do, or
Yeah, thank you. So I think I find intersectionality and analysis of intersectional components of identity very, very useful in the sense of not only gendered analysis, but also, I have this for the art historians among you guys. So I'll just flip it over when we talk. But I don't think it's just a gendered issue. It's a religion question too, and it comes across also yet another axis of class and another axis of ethnicity, because being white Russian is not like being from Uzbeki part of the country. So we have this for Lorna Simpson, of course, and this is just Renee Cox, and it's from the wonderful, of course, Oh Mama, and she's tackling the stereotypes of being her black woman body. Yes, you know, of course, it's Venice of Hottentot, but of course her name is Sahara Bahman. She's entitled for a real name. And this is Tamara Brodinski, who's tackling her stereotypes on her own body. So, yeah, so thank you so very much. Oh, can we have another then?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
I just was wondering about the process of your study. How you get those women? I imagine you are not the only one in the study, so how does it go to reach those women who are probably not very known as artists?
Yeah, okay. So I started this from a very personal reason. I myself, I'm an immigrant, 1.5 generation. I came to Israel when I was a child with my parents. So this is an ongoing in a negotiation of myself. So this is just why I started and embarked this subject from, everything we can do in this world. But it's just me probing into the field and going to art academies every time they finish another graduation. I just go and see the exhibitions and see, this is one. This could be interesting. I have to have her email address, and then I can contact her. So that's why it took 9 years.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much.